over the years, I've gradually become more flexible as I've realized that there is such a natural, curious learning element that comes with kids. The fact is that a lot of times, especially as parents, if you're starting off fresh, you're like, but I've got this checklist. We need to like mark it all off. And many times I started realizing, actually, if you put the options out there, it's kind of like putting a tray of sandwiches out there, people will help themselves, and maybe at the end you might have to say, okay, we've got 2 left. Come on, somebody please eat them. But usually they'll kind of, the people will help themselves to it. And so I found it's really giving the opportunities to your kids. And so my structure of scheduling and planning became more laxed in terms of like, let's try and achieve this in this time frame. And I tried to give myself that space. And it worked really well for the beginning. Then as more kids came into the mix, and my second, and then when the twins came into the mix, that threw me for a bit of a curveball to go from 2 kids to 4 suddenly. That was a bit more challenging. Yeah, it was a bit crazy. And my planning for a bit, I actually had a really solid group of other homeschool moms. We'd get together at the beginning of the year and or summer actually, and we'd brainstorm what we wanted for the school year. And we'd do like a brain dump and exchange resource ideas and things like that. And then from there, I'd kind of try and narrow it down. But it really was
That's an excellent idea.
Yeah, it was so much fun. And they were also really creative and very intentional parents. And they had strengths that I didn't have. And so there were things that they brought to the table that were really beneficial that I was like, oh, I never thought of that. Or, oh, that's a brilliant way of incorporating math into an area that I would never have thought of, or whatever, right? And so I loved that. And then I would take those lists of ideas and then go, okay, I can't do everything because I'm a dreamer as well. So sometimes I would over order curriculum and then be like, I only did half. And that would weigh on me sometimes, and that was hard. But what I'd find is a lot of my planning was chicken scratch. I'd find it on notebooks, or I'd get a planner and then I'd only use it for half the year. And then January came and I was like, oh, I fell off the wagon because it wasn't quite going right. So my planning has kind of morphed. Some years have been stronger than others. And I realized, especially in more recent years, that what I needed was more just like something to direct me. And so what I'd been doing is more just in a notebook, kind of brain dumping. What is my vision? What are my goals for the year? Sometimes, but you lose papers or you lose things, or you put it somewhere and you think it's safe. And so I felt like I was becoming, actually, in my attempt to be organized and focused, I was becoming a little scatterbrained. And I'd still have my Post-it notes in my books and things, but it wasn't always working out well. And so some years, as I said, were really organized and structured. And that's also really hard too, because if you fall behind by a week, suddenly you're like, shoot, how do I catch up? My whole year's thrown off, and that becomes very stressful. And I didn't like that feeling either. So I feel like I've tried different variations throughout the year, or years, I guess. And that's kind of where I ended up realizing there's so many options out there and so many things people have created. And I realized I needed something more tailored to creating a vision and a goal setting plan that you can kind of stick to throughout the year.
That's great. I just want to back up for a sec.
Sorry.
Like the first, no, that's great. This is great. To the first year where you created a plan and then you went through it. Now, do you think that is a good idea for beginning homeschoolers, just so they feel like not so scattered and able like to kind of focus in themselves as what they should be doing or what they want to do, or not, and then after that, like allow themselves like more give and more flexibility, as now they know, kind of see what their child or their children, how they operate as being a homeschooled kid and their interests, what do you think?
I think planning and structuring your plan is still important in many ways.
Mhm.
So even with how I do things now, I still create like a daily plan of like how we're going to try and cover our curriculum, how we're
Mhm.
going to do those things. So there's still structure to it. I think that what I did the first year was actually really beneficial for me. Something that actually really helped me is the homeschool teacher that's and still is actually following us. I remember she gave us the checklist of requirements at the time, and they've changed in BC the way we follow standards now. But at the time, I had the whole checklist, and my goal was to check it all off. And I remember her telling me, first of all, we pretty much got like almost 100% of it done. And she told me, keep in mind that in the school system, typically teachers only achieve about maybe 80% of it.
That's
And when
right.
she
Yeah,
when she told me that, there was actually a sense of relief.
right.
And so within that structure, because even though I saw like everything planned out, it was a sense of like, oh, so if I miss that lesson, or if my kid didn't absorb that lesson perfectly, it's okay.
Yeah,
Like
it's okay.
I can breathe actually. And I think
Yeah.
that's the stress that I felt, in that I needed to keep everything so structured the first year. So I think there's still value in keeping it, especially if it's your first year or you're trying to figure out what it could look like. Um, but I think also considering what's your personality. There are some people who are really type A's and really need that structure or it stresses them out. Um,
Hmm.
you have to consider your child, but you also need to consider yourself. So sometimes we
Hmm.
think a lot about like, how does the child learn? But you as a teacher, you also have to think about your strengths and weaknesses. And we need to be probably more adaptable to our child than they need to be to us when
Yes.
we're
Yeah,
teaching. But we do need to think,
definitely.
especially when we're with them all day long and we're mom and teacher and chauffeur and everything. Uh,
Hmm.
how do we keep ourselves in a in a good mental space
Yes.
and don't overwhelm ourselves so we're not stressed,
Yeah,
we miss something.
right.
I
Yes.
think structure is a good thing if you're jumping into it and you're going, I need to just know what this looks like, and then I'll know where I can flex, right?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
when I was homeschooling our kids, well, I had the benefit of having, like, been a primary teacher. So I knew about planning. I didn't know anything really much about homeschool resources.
Hmm.
And maybe I didn't really need them in the first 3 years. I just kind of knew what I needed to do. And well, I guess I use like the Sunlight curriculum
Hmm.
readers, and I use like the Singapore math, and I used Abeka phonics for teaching reading, and that's about it. I didn't want to use the readers from my home province. And then in those first 3 years, in like kindergarten, first and second, third grade, it's um yeah, it is very flexible.
Yeah.
So yeah, I didn't really need I didn't know about homeschool resources, and I was living on the other side of the world as well. So, but
Hmm.
anyway, it all fell into place, and we had times when we took breaks, and we had times when like on my husband's day off, well, he would be asking the boys, what do you want to create? And they'd look on the internet and find something, and they
Hmm.
could use the shop at the hospital where we were stationed to like to build things and stuff like that. So yeah, it was all good. We survived without all of the different homeschooling resources
Yeah.
that are available today. So
Yes. Yeah.
yeah. Um Now, so getting back to the planner,
Hmm.
so you obviously, it kind of evolved, and you made a planner, um a plan that was for your own family. And
Yes.
then eventually, did you like share this with friends and get like good feedback from them? Like, how did that all evolve to where now you have it on Teachers Pay Teachers, right?
Yes. So I made it initially because I think over the past few years, especially, I had kind of been searching for a kind of like a homeschool vision planner that would kind of give some direction to the year, so that I
Mhm.
wasn't doing the chicken scratch thing.
Right.
And that would kind of give some really good pointed questions. And so I went through it in the form of I first of all I asked so as I said, there's multiple siblings in my family that homeschool.
Mm-hmm.
So I asked some of my siblings questions and things that they value when they're planning, because I know that some of my siblings actually, they also get together and they also do these kind of planning things because they maybe some of their styles coincide really well. And so they'll plan together. And so I said, like, what are things that are important to you? What are ideas? Because, we'll share those ideas the same way that we share resources or really cool little tips or things like that in our
Right.
homeschooling
Yes.
journeys. And so they kind of gave me some neat questions or things that they ponder when they're planning their homeschool year. And this is I almost want to say it's like the semi-preliminary to planning your year at a glance kind of thing. Just sort of asking like, what's the direction you're going in? And so I'd asked questions. I knew the questions that I asked myself also often, or sometimes there's, I'd come across blogs where you'd have a homeschool mom saying, oh, I always make sure I know like these things, but it was really hard to find like some sort of a workbook or something that really kind of clearly laid it out and kind of just worked you through it. And I didn't want it to be overcomplicated, and I didn't want it to be like, a 300-page workbook for a year. Like that just seems overwhelming. And I'm like, no, it shouldn't be that. It should be
Right.
something clear. And even if you don't know the answer right now, that in maybe in 3 months, as you're going through the year, you go, oh, actually, I know what my direction is in this area. Or I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't sure about it. I prayed about it. I spoke to a few people, and now I know this is the direction I'm taking. Um, especially if you're starting out new, or, I've spoken to a lot of moms who either are just jumping into homeschooling or curious about it. And
Mm-hmm.
they're like, a question I always ask is, if you were to think about the perfect homeschool day, you're thinking about homeschooling, what does that actually look like to you? What
Right.
does that, if you were to paint a picture? And sometimes they go, I have no idea. Like, I don't know. Do they sit at a table? I'm like, well, I don't know. Is that how you envision it in your head at home? Like, or do you want them around, the couches, or are you thinking on the floor? Like, what do you envision? Because it needs to work for everyone. And so, I started thinking, I've had a lot of moms who often come and ask me these questions. And I walked through a friend who was going through this whole process, especially post-COVID. She was really concerned with some of the things that her sons were coming home with. And um, so she wanted just some direction. And so we had these conversations, and I shared it with her, and I've shared this with a few people. And I know with her, we've had a lot of conversations, and she said, especially like she said, throughout the year, there were so many times that she was like, and she's a formally educated preschool teacher. So she has, a lot of background in, preschool education and how to run daycares and programs
Mm-hmm.
and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But she said she kept referring back to it because she's like, every time she felt she was veering and she wasn't sure if she was sticking with what she should be doing, she would come back to it and go, nope, I'm on track, or, oh, we're totally veering off the goals. Like, this was the goal this year with our kids. This is what we
Mm-hmm.
wanted to achieve in their educational journey in this grade.
Mm-hmm.
So she said it really helped, and it helped her formulate a really good picture for what she wanted. So
Mm-hmm.
it was a combination of contributed contributed members into it,
Yeah.
kind of my process of how I prepare for the school year, and then people's experiences and those who have used it,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of how they found it.
That sounds excellent. I just love that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that focus on like on thinking of your goals, you know, and what that journey is going to look like.
Mhm.
Yeah, I really, if I were homeschooling still, I would be definitely all in and would love to get it for
Oh,
sure.
that's awesome.
Yeah, um so is this like a feature that a lot of planners don't have? Do you know? Or
One thing that I have found is like I've looked at a lot of homeschool planners. There used to be a planner that I would say is probably the closest.
Mhm,
It was actually started by a homeschool mom, probably a few years before I started homeschooling, and then she
mhm,
stopped it, I think, in my third year of homeschooling. She was doing it on the side, and she was based out of Kelowna. I can't remember her name now. But she stopped doing it. And her planner was probably the closest
mhm,
in some ways, but it still missed kind of some of those goal setting elements.
mhm,
So what I've often seen is planners that either are very goal oriented, and there are some incredible ones. So if you're like, you can find those like girl boss kind of planners, or they are just homeschool and they are tracking more like grades and subject areas and planning specifics in terms of how many chapters you're going to cover, what are your projects, all of those things. And those things are important, but there wasn't something that kind of sort of started to amalgamate them. Um, and that was kind of where I was stuck, where I was like, I kind of want something that sort of amalgamates it a bit, and
mhm,
gives a bit more direction. And I felt like, you can also go and get teacher planners. Typically I've used a lot of like the happy planners for my just like my annual planning. Um, Outside of that, where I just jot down when we're doing things, or
mhm.
just to track what we've completed,
Great,
especially
right,
reporting. I really
great.
like formats,
Mhm,
um, but nothing that really helped with planning for the year and brainstorming and creating a vision and a focus for the year. And so I felt like that was missing. And so
okay,
that's kind of why I ended up kind of creating it.
yeah,
Um, so yeah.
that's great. Though this makes me really curious about your planner, and I'm sure when people hear this interview that they will be too. So, how much is your planner? How much does
Um,
it cost?
so it's $20 and it's a PDF. And then you have it, you can print it as many times as you want.
Mm-hmm.
So you have it for life, right?
Great.
Um, I, I've already had kind of some feedback of like, oh, this would be really cool to include. So I am already considering potentially including some other elements to add
Mm-hmm.
into that. Um, at that point, we'll see what that looks like. Probably just do the add-ons. We'll figure that out as they
Yeah.
come. But yeah, $20 and then you get the full PDF and you can use the pages
Okay.
as snippets. So
Yeah. Well, you'll have to put the link in somewhere. Maybe when I get this posted into our Facebook group, you could put the link in the comments. That would be
for sure.
awesome.
Yeah,
Yes.
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, one more thing. You also created a Bible study for kids.
Yes, I
So
did.
that tell us a little bit about that and
Yeah.
yeah, what that looks like.
So basically what it is so there's three levels. The idea is the first one is for kind of your preschooler age, um, not really reading, kind of more listening to either Bible stories or if you're reading, the Bible through as a family and listening to chapters of the Bible. Um, Second level would be like early reader, early writer. And then the third one would be for those kids who are able to start writing and can kind of, read and write on their own and have that kind of more personal time with God. So
Mhm,
the goal of it is right now it's a 3-month program. And the goal is just that they're simple, also PDF option formats. And the idea is so what I was doing is I was looking for an option for my kids. I'd found like a prayer journal, we'd used other just like lined pieces of paper, like notebooks kind of style, for our kids to try and do their Bible study and try and get into those habits. But kids often, I find, are a lot more inspired by specific designated zones and areas to color and things that are engaging, just to build some of those habits. And so my kids are very creative. So where there's opportunity for color, an opportunity to make the page come alive, even better.
Mhm.
So I started with creating a format that they could fill in. So understanding first how to read the Bible. So an area for them to write down, like, what book of the Bible, where's the passage, so they can understand how to find things. And so the idea there is, one thing, I help out with youth ministry, and even watching my kids and in ministry in general, there's a lot of kids that are growing up right now, and a lot of them don't actually know how to flip through the Bible and find the books of the Bible, or how to even read the chapters and verses and how to locate things. So this just helps them build that habit of knowing where to find that information, how to write it in. So just building that habit of knowing how to put that in. So for preschool age, it's really just listening and understanding as much as they can to their level, right, of what they're listening and processing, and being able to respond. So there's just really a basic area for them to draw out kind of what they're listening to, or a conversation with God. And the point of this is that for preschoolers is understanding that they can listen to God's word, and that they can also respond either through art or have a conversation. They can speak to God, like God is right there, and you can have a personal relationship with him. So that he's not for when you're older, he's not for only the adults or whatever, that,
Right.
a
Yeah.
relationship with God can happen right away.
Yeah.
So I wanted that kind of to start off right away. And then same with early readers, there's areas for kids to start either drawing or writing as best they can, praise items, prayer requests, trying to draw or write what they're understanding of what they're reading. There's also on each of the pages, you're also going to see there's a verse that coincides with each of the levels. So if you're doing it as a family, you could do, let's say, the same page all together. And there's actually a verse, if you want to do biblical memorization, you can do that and all memorize the same verse, or at least read the same verse together that day as well, on top of
Mhm.
whatever other Bible reading you're
Mhm.
doing.
Mhm.
Um, and the idea is just to kind of bring everybody, ideally as a family, together and just kind of focus on God's word,
Mhm.
and help kids realize that the Bible, is not dead. It's not an old, dusty book
Right.
on the shelf. It's
Yes. Right.
alive,
Right.
living,
Yes.
and that they can engage in it and they can learn
Mhm.
from it. And there are really fascinating things in the Bible, that um, there are crazy stories, there are cool stories, there's so much to learn from, and that um, we can grow from it, and that God is right there. He's not our parents' faith. He can be
Mhm.
as
Yeah,
well.
he's not far away in the
Yeah,
distance. Yeah.
yeah.
So what I like about what you just shared about your what do you call it again?
I think I had it initially started as a family Bible challenge.
Okay.
Is how we started it. So I think I've kind of left it as that. I haven't
Mhm.
formally given it any other name. So it's just, yeah.
Okay. Well, what I like about that, about your idea, about how you laid it out, is that it's family friendly.
Mhm.
And, thinking back when I was homeschooling, that would have been so beneficial. Like, I was just like caught up with like, um, you know, grade 4, grade 2, and preschool,
Mhm.
and all these different things you have to like kind of bring in, and oversee, and so it gets really overwhelming for the brain,
Mhm.
you know.
Yeah.
And so then like if you don't have a Bible curriculum, it's like, well, what do you do? So,
Mhm.
we would like read Bible stories, and that's about it.
Mhm.
But
Yeah,
this is a way to really get them engaged, and I like the idea of them learning, how to find things, how to write down the address of and so
yeah,
forth. So yeah, I love that idea. And
yeah.
it's a brilliant, very brilliant. Okay, I don't have any more questions.
Awesome.
But thank you so much for coming on
For
and
sure.
sharing, this is very valuable.
Oh,
And
good.
I'm
I'm
really
glad.
excited to share it in our Facebook group. So, and on our YouTube channel, which is called Confident Kids Academy. So, um, and also thank you for joining our Facebook group.
Absolutely.